Good evening, everyone, and welcome to BT's On the Fly. Tonight, we're with Fly Fishers International Women Connect. We're going to be tying a Tuff EZY Lime Trude. We're Gretchen and Al Beatty from Boise, Idaho. And my lovely wife, Gretchen, is going to start the program tonight with a pattern. We call it the EZY Lime Trude. And there it is in her vise.
Oh, should we go to the recipe first? Let's do that first.
Yes, okay, you got it. There we are.
So I'm going to be tying on a size 10. The thread is black or lime green. The tail is elk, deer, or moose. I'm going to be using moose. The rib is fine copper wire. Body is stretchy nylon. Peacock white poly is what I'm going to be using. The hackle is brown. And the head is going to be black thread. The thing that's going to be key in this pattern, in addition to some other things that we will point out, is the difference in how the wing between the calf and the poly. And so we'll be giving you hints on both of those types of materials. This is my poly yarn, the skein of poly yarn, moose. We've got peacock, our hooks. This is how we get a lot of our copper, and it's from the old telephone step-by-step offices when they were taking those out. We were lucky enough to be able to get some of that. This is the stretchy yarn, or black thread. Here in we're kind of desert area almost. We have a lot of static in the winter, well, in the summer too, actually. And so we use this static guard. So I'll use that right now. Take care of some of the materials so we don't have trouble with that. Here's some thread magic that you can use if you're having problems with your fingers and stuff. And this is our hackle. Okay, we're going to get a hook in the vise. And while we're doing that, we'll talk just a little bit about moose. If you're just starting to tie with hair, moose is a really good material to use because if you take a look at it, it just doesn't flare as bad as elk or deer. So this is some moose, and that's where I'm going to get my moose. So let's go to the vise now. And we're going to start out. Now, instead of starting out with the thread, I'm going to cheat a little and start out with my stretchy nylon. I'm going to start my base wrap about where I want the wing to go. So I'll start it right about there and go back. And notice how I hold the waist end up, and that slides the thread, or in this case, the stretchy nylon, right down to the previous wrap. That helps you get a nice, smooth base wrap. So we'll cut off our waist, and I'll get the little bit of the moose for my tail. This moose does not have a lot of fuzz and stuff in it, but I still will take it over to the waist pin where I will run my fingers through it to get rid of any of the under fur that's there. Okay, we've got that all cleaned out. And as you can see, the tips are pretty uneven. The fish probably don't care, but fly shops and fishermen do seem to care, and tyers even more. So I will take this and put it in a hair stacker and even those tips out. And always take the hair out of the stacker, pointing in the direction that you're going to tie it onto the hook. Saves you a lot of trouble if you do that. A lot of questions revolve around how much hair to use. If you take, there's several ways you can do it, but the way that I find is easiest to explain is if I twist it. And at that twist over point is if that's approximately equal.
Your scissors is blocking the camera.
Is that better? Can't see. Okay. If that is equal to the outside diameter of the eye, that should be about the right amount. So I think this looks like a pretty good amount. I want it to go from just behind the eye to the bend, around where the bend starts. That's the shank. The full hook length would be from the back of the bend and the front of the eye. But for this hair wing, this is where we want it, just this big. We'll set it down. I'm going to hold this towards me. And the reason for that is then as I come over, the thread torque is going to pull it right up on top. I'm going to do some pretty tight turns, keeping it pretty smooth. And as I get closer to the bend, I loosen my wraps so that I don't flare it too much. That looks pretty good. We'll go back. And I'm going to as you notice, I cut this so that I have a nice beveled area. Now, the next thing I'm going to tie on is the rib. Let's see, where is it? It's so fine. It's hard to see. Oh, there it is. Okay. I like to tie the rib on from the back. And then there again, the thread torque is going to pull it around to the bottom of the hook, to the underside. So when I get back here, it should be right on the underside of the hook. So I'm going to come back. Now, as I did that, you can see that I've formed my body. So I'm going to come up here, since I don't need this color anymore, and get my black thread. And the way I change thread, oh, I want to show you something too. Notice that we have O-rings on the bottom, for some reason I can't talk. And that's to hold this thread so it doesn't come unthreaded. So we just take this out. Well, I didn't need to do that right, did I? This is how we put it on. Just take it and pull it out from under. Now to get it on the hook.
Where is that O-ring?
It's on my bobbin. Let's see. See, this is my bobbin.
Okay.
And so we put the O-ring on there and the thread goes just back. That's hard to do. There we go.
Okay.
I haven't tied in front of the camera for several months, so I'm got to remember my moves here. Now, in order to tie this off, I'm going to hold the green in my left hand, the black in my right hand, and I'm just going to tie over the top. Now I'm going to switch and bring this over the tops of those. Now I can trim off, and then I need to tie off the waist end of my black. And that's how I change threads. Now I'm going to want to end the green actually at about a point just right above the hook point. It's about as far as the green is going to be. So I'm going to put my thread there so that I know where to stop. The somehow I got that in there. There we go. Got the copper wire. We bring it up from behind and we make even wraps. Notice I still use my scissors to cut the wire, but I cut way back so I don't hurt the tips of it. Put that back in the hackle pliers. Okay, now the next thing, of course, we want is our peacock, so I'll reach over and grab it. And I don't need too much, so this one will probably do just fine. And I dropped it. Woohoo! There it is. I will tie it on at the base, not at the tip. And I don't know if you can see it on the camera, but you see this rib. I always like to tie that on this one so it's facing back. And that causes the cup of the peacock to go like that. So I'm tying it on. I'm going to want it to come right about up to there. Want that over a little bit farther. There we go. Perfect. And I try to get these wraps as close to the previous one. One of the ways I do that is I come up, I kind of bring it around tight. So I kind of hold it towards the bend of the hook, and then I come back. And that keeps it pretty tight. I don't want any spaces in those wraps. I'm going to finish my base wrap. So I have a nice, I'm starting to think about the platform now for my hackle. The next thing that I put on, of course, is my poly yarn. Now, poly yarn, when you take it off of the skein or off of the board, however you get it, you notice it has these nice little kind of knots in it. And so the trick is, how do I get those nice little knots out? Well, I like to take my bodkin first of all and just run it through here like this. Just a little bit at a time. And you see how nice you can fluff that out? There's a really nasty one on this end. So I think we've got that pretty good. Poly yarn does not compress like calf tail. So this trick to using poly in this particular application is to try not to have a big, what do I want to say, cliff where you're going to be trying your hackle on. So I tie it on in 2 pieces. So we'll take a small chunk of it. And I won't be using that whole, trim off the end. It's nice and flat. And the first one that I'm going to tie on, I want to tie it about halfway down my platform for my hackle. Okay. And then the second one that I tie on, and I think that's going to be enough. And maybe just a tad bit more. It looked a little sparse. I'm going to tie it closer. So now I've got more of a slope going from the eye back to my peacock. A gentle slope without a big cliff. Can you see that pretty well?
You've got a nice taper there on the screen.
Good. Okay, the length of the tail that we want, or the wing, I'm sorry, is about halfway back to the tail. So right back to here. Now, if I pull on this really hard and measure that, when I release it, it's going to spring back. So I take just a gentle grasp on it, measure it about the half where I want to be. Let's come this way so you can see what I'm doing. Boy, that's awkward. There, we did it. Okay, there's my wing. Now, the only thing I have left to do, of course, is my hackle. Okay. It's a nice brown hackle. And I want to bare some stem. And you want enough bare stem so that your first wrap is not going to have a bunch of fibers on it. Now, one of the tricks you can do is you can just tear this all off even, or I can leave a few little fibers there on the side that's not going to be tied against the hook, so it'll be going like this. I don't know if I explained
Gretchen,
that.
you have a question.
Yeah.
Jennifer wants to know, is poly yarn the same as polyester yarn, and can you buy it at a craft store?
What we use is Fentex. It's Phentex, is it?
Right, and what you find it, you go on any of the places that sell yarn, let's just say eBay or Amazon, you look for Fentex, and that's spelled Phentex, craft and slipper yarn.
Now, sometimes places like Hobby Lobby or Michael's or Joann's, sometimes they have it, but not always. In fact, that's part of the fun, I think, of tying is to play around with new materials and see what you can come up with. So if you have something in your craft box that you want to try, go for it and just play with it. And when I'm trying a new material, I don't generally try to do a fly right away. I just put in a hook, do a base wrap so I have something to tie it to, and I'll just take that material, tie it on, see what it'll do, maybe take it off, tie on some more, and just kind of play with it that way. In fact, that's how I learned to work with peacock and ostrich hurls, was by just taking a hook, not trying to tie a fly, and practicing. So we do that a lot with things, Al and I both. I hope that answers your question. Okay, now as you can see, I'm not going to get a bunch of stuff going backwards because I've got that bare hook to start with in that one place. So now we'll just start coming forward. Now, because I've got a gentle slope, I'm not having too much trouble, but let's pretend that I'm having trouble and that it wants to slide down the hill. So one of the things I can do is put my thread right there so that as I come around and start getting to that slope, the tension of the thread against the hackle will keep it from sliding down the hill. Okay, I'm just going to take one, two wraps around the hackle. Now, and so I'm going to dogleg it, the butt end back into the palmered hackle. And see, now I've got a nice little head forming there. As I force it back in, I'll pull it out. That's a little toughy. Now, as you can see, it falls right back in there and you can't see that butt end. And that makes a real strong connection. And then I don't have it sticking out there trying to cover it up and ruining my head. That happens lots. The right way to do the whip finish is starting your wraps back tight against the hackle and wrap forward. So each wrap comes more towards the eye. So we'll take 1, 2, 3, 4 wraps. Cut off my thread. Now, if I were normally tying anywhere but close to a camera, I would put some head cement on that.
And at this time, we usually go to the message screen, the chat screen, and answer questions. We've already done that thanks to Sandy's help. On the poly yarn, being the same as polyester, it's not as far as we know. Any other questions before we move into a tougher version of the same fly?
I have one question. I have, as far as the tail, I have, you said squirrel is a possibility. I have gray squirrel and fox squirrel and dyed brown squirrel tail. And is there, I guess they can all be interchangeable, but it looks like your moose is quite dark. Does that make any difference?
Zero. We put on whatever the customer asks for, and if they don't ask us what they want, we just say we'll give them a traditional dry fly tail, and we always do moose because the moose is the easiest to tie with.
But if we were doing squirrel, basically what we have here is the red fox
Yeah, we
squirrel.
got fox squirrels, and that's
we
what
would
we
use that, yeah. But gray squirrel would be gorgeous, I would
I
think.
mean, you could even do hackle barbs off of a larger feather.
Or there's another thing that you can use.
What?
Makeup brush.
Oh, that's right.
Let me get my makeup brush and
Oh,
show
yeah.
them.
Yeah,
this
you
is cool.
You gotta show them this little trick. This is kind of cool. You
And
get these
while
makeup
she's
brushes
getting
over.
that, Penny asked, will you be demonstrating tying the fly with dubbing?
I hadn't planned on it, but I'll make an immediate change in the middle of the stream, and we'll do that.
Okay. Well, maybe we should go to the material.
Okay, you're on the materials camera.
Yeah. Okay, so I've got two different colors here, and these were not real expensive.
Hold it down closer to the material so they're all in focus.
Okay. They weren't real expensive ones. They were
Got them at
both
the dollar store, didn't you?
No, I'm not sure. I think I got these at Walmart, maybe. I don't know where I got them because I looked several places, but they're ELF. You can get them anywhere. That's a very common brand. And this makes a beautiful tail. Look at this.
Why don't you hold that up in front of the device camera?
Okay. Maybe how's
And
that?
it comes off the brush already stacked for you. It's really some dynamite stuff.
And then if you want brown, this is a light brown. Get a clump of it here so you can see it. You could do a wing with that too. Look at that.
Yeah, you sure could.
You can do it. Where we started using or came onto this is we have a friend in Australia, and he finds that it's difficult to get some of our materials that we use. So for elk and deer and moose and those things, this is what he uses because he just can't get that stuff.
Yeah,
And the kangaroo is a little too short.
right, but kangaroo is really a great substitute for hare's ear. He sent me some kangaroo, and we've been playing with it. It's a lot of fun.
So any more questions? And if you're practicing, this is a cheap way to do it too. And also if you're kind of allergic to the hair, this is another thing you can use. So and you put this on and you can hardly tell the
Oh, I'll
difference.
tell you what, it's a dynamite thing. It's the best discovery we didn't make ourselves in quite some time. Okay, thanks to our friend in Australia. Let me swap our chairs around, Gretch.
Okay.
There you go.
So are there any more questions about what I did? Nope. You want soft touch, Al?
Let me see what I got here. We're gonna have to do some changes last minute to accommodate I've got some green right here. I've got soft touch green right here. So
good.
So I'm gonna have to do this different. Let's see. Okay, well, we'll start again with the recipe.
I think they want you to demonstrate dubbing, huh?
Yeah, it seems like it, yeah. But anyway, we're gonna use moose for the tail. We already know that that's an easy one, and we've got it laying out here, though there's a lot of others. Wait a minute. Let's use one of those brushes. Why don't you hand me Somebody asked about brown. Let's use the brown one. I mean, if we're going to deviate from the plan, we just may as well do a good job of it.
Anything else you want us to do different?
Yeah, shout out, folks. Anything else? Let me come back here to anything else you want us to do different before? I mean, we have a place here that's got rivals every fly shop in the country for stuff. So if we don't have the stuff, it's just probably not available.
I've been thinking about going into the 12-point plan.
Oh, the
I'm a little
12-point plan.
I'm a little addicted.
A little addicted to stuff. Well, if there's nothing else, let's go back to that recipe. Instead of white poly yarn, I'm going to be using calf. And calf has some properties very different than the poly yarn does. We'll both be using brown hackle. However, I'm going to show you just a little bit way of applying it. Again, what we're here to do is share with you a lot of different ways of doing it. And I'll be using all black thread. I won't be using any lime because we're going to be using lime dubbing, which it says body, peacock, and green yarn. We're going to be using green dubbing instead of yarn.
And you'll be applying the head different than I did too. Is that correct?
I'll be applying the head different. We're going to be using a technique that Gretchen and I have been teaching for the last several years called the tie wrap system. And it's a waste management system that allows waste to be hidden rather than having to figure out how to cover it up. And we'll talk about it a little bit when we get to the hackle. If there's no questions, I'll just go right ahead and get started. All right, well, let's remove Gretchen's hook and let me get the one I tied this afternoon so that we would have a roadmap fly.
You might hold the one up next to it so they kind of see the difference of how the poly looks compared to the
Well, I
calf.
guarantee you on the water, the fish don't really give a darn. But I can tell you what, I would venture a guess that none of you 10 foot from the end of your fly rod could tell one from the other.
Probably not.
In fact, I'm pretty sure I couldn't. But anyway, there they are. And now we'll take and set aside this one. And let me get out a hook. Set it in there. And get it anchored. All right. Now I won't be using this, so I'm going to put this, get it ready to store it. And what I do is I pull the O-ring off, slip it back over the thread so that it slips back on the center of the bobbin, and it keeps this from coming undone. I cannot tell you how many shows I have traveled to. There's something about the vibration of an airplane that causes all your bobbins to unthread themselves.
There's a little gremlin in there doing
Yeah,
that.
a little gremlin gets in your fly kit. That's what it is.
O-rings come in a lot of different sizes,
Yeah,
and we
you
get
get
those like at
Ace Hardware.
Ace Hardware
Yeah.
or yeah. You want to go to the materials?
Yeah, let's go to the materials. And let's see, I'm going to have to do some things different here. Let's see. The black thread is already over at the vise. I won't need that quite yet. I'm not going to need the mousse. We're going to use that. Put that aside. All right, I'll get started by putting the thread on the hook. And I'm going to take it out from under the retaining O-ring and just get it ready to wrap. And I'm going to start the thread base in just about the middle of the hook, maybe slightly forward of the center. Couple of turns in front, and then I'm going to wrap back over just like Gretchen did, keeping tension here with my left hand on the waist end and tension on the bobbin, and the two tensions working against each other make touching wraps very easy to apply. And I'll just pick up the pace there a little bit till we get right there towards to the back of the hook, and then I'll come forward. I'm going to come forward almost all the way back to my starting point. And I want you to notice right here that I did not come all the way back to the starting point. Would you give me a tight shot, Gretchen?
Oh,
Number one.
Okay, yeah, right.
Okay, you see my thread did not come back to the starting point. We're going to talk about material creep. And we all become aware of it when our fly gets to the point in the construction process where there's no room left to wrap the hackle. That means the material creep probably caused you problems. But anyway, let's get over to the materials. And now I get to play with it. I haven't done these brushes for quite some time, so I'll just cut off a chunk. Now I don't need to clean anything out of this. This is unusual. It comes off all cleaned and already stacked. You just need to have the right amount. And there it is. I'm going to make it equal to the length of the hook shank and tie that on. Alrighty. Now, what I want you to notice that when I pull up on the waist, if you take a real tight shot, the bulk of the material of the tail is about equal to those several turns that I didn't take coming forward. So when I trim this, it's going to land right on that spot. Rather, if I had wrapped it all the way forward to that spot, then I'd be slightly forward. And the next thing you know, I end up in a situation where I don't have room to put any more materials on the hook. And usually that's the hackle. Let's go back over here to the materials area. And I want to get some more of this wire. Back in the day, I used to work for the phone company. I was a telephone repairman when I first started. And back in those days, telephones rang with a real ringer rather than this tweety stuff that we hear today. And anyway, this is a coil from a ringer in a telephone. All right, now the request was for a dubbed back part of the body. So I'll just kind of move my thread back a little ways, and I'm going to reach over and get some dubbing wax. Take the cap off. And I want you to notice that the wax barely peeks up above the edge. I see so many people with it cranked. Well, I don't even want to do it, but they'll have it cranked a quarter of an inch or a half an inch up above the edge of the tube, and then they wonder why they always have a glob of wax on their thread. Well, this is just barely peeking over the edge.
And in order to do this touch dubbing, you need a very, very sticky wax, not a wax that you would put
Very
on
sticky
your
wax, but I
fingers.
want you to notice that I'm getting wax on there, but I'm not getting any big globby glumps. I'm just making sure that I'm making the thread sticky. Now, very important, most important thing I'm going to teach you tonight is to put that back on before you do anything else. Because invariably what's happening has happened to me many a time on camera where I end up dropping it in the waste bin. And I trust me, that sticky wax in a waste bin do not get along well. Okay, I'm going to pull out some of the dubbing out of this package. All right. Now, this next thing that I want to tell you about touch dubbing is really important. Let's go back to it. I'm holding this in my hand. And I want you to notice I am not holding it in a death grip like this. I'm holding it so it sticks up above my fingers so that my fingers are not anchoring those fibers. So let's take a close look at that. Up close, what I'm talking about is I want to make sure that all this stuff is free from my hands. I cannot touch dub with the stuff being held tightly in my fingers. I have to allow the sticky wax thread to pull those fibers out of the bundle, like I'm doing right now.
Oh, wow.
Now, I haven't done anything but touch that to the wax thread. Now I'm going to twist. There we go. And I'm just going to wrap now towards and put in that back part that we did before. Well, I'm just going to cover it all. I want to keep some consistency in the dimension of the body. And you don't have to cover up with a whole lot of dubbing if you, in fact, put something under the body. So the underbody is what I'm talking about. Now I'm going to do different than Gretchen did. I'm going to show you another way to accomplish the same thing that she did. She just wrapped it on the back part. I'm going to wrap it over the whole thing, and I'll start by reaching over to the materials area and getting myself a strand of this peacock. I'll just pull one off right there. That looks pretty good. We'll get back over here. And the one thing that I like to do, I want you to notice that ridge is pointing upward, which will actually be pointing forward here in just a minute. We'll just tie that on. All right. And I'll start wrapping forward to meet that thread. And that's looking pretty good. Now I'm just going to break that end off. I guess I'm not going to break it off. It broke all right in the wrong place. And now I'm going to counter wrap my rib over the dubbed area and the peacock area so that I'm providing extra support to both. Just an optional way of doing things. Now, I'm wrapping and anchoring that ribbing material. And just like Gretchen did, I'll reach in and I'll cut way back in the jaws of the scissors so I don't ruin it out on the tips where I'm doing most of my trimming. And let me just pick up a hackle pliers here, and I'll just put that in my hackle pliers so that I can find it when I go to tie the next fly, whatever it may be. Now we're going to be going to the materials area again, and let me get this poly yarn out of the, wait a minute, let me show you one of the things you run into trouble with poly yarn. One of the places where you run into trouble with poly yarn is just like Gretchen talked about. You run into the situation where you end up with a big lump. Well, there's a way to work around that and just tie the fly a little differently. And that is just to tie it all in one bundle like this. Leave it sticking out over the hook eye. Cut that off as the wing, and then cut this off as a very short, stubby head like you have on an elk hair caddis. It can be plan B when everything goes to heck for you and you want to go fishing. That can be your plan B. Then the hackle, of course, would be wrapped over that. That's not what I'm working on this pattern tonight. We're going to be working with calf tail, and calf tail is much more difficult and much easier to work with depending on how you want to look at it. Calf tail has the ability to compress under thread pressure. That's nice. That's very handy. But it can be just a real pain in the neck to deal with on some other levels. But let's get some calf tail out here in the materials. And I'm just going to pull out a bundle. Let's see there. That looks like a better spot for a bundle of hair. And all the hair in this bundle is different lengths, and there's a bunch of trash here that I need to get rid of. And I'm going to just move out over the waste bin like Gretchen did when she got rid of the moose. And I'm going to get rid of this waste that you see right here, and we'll see you over at the vise in just a minute. Right. Yeah, that cleaned that out pretty good. So now what we have left, and when we talk about the layers of any hair that you use, I don't care whether it's deer, elk, moose, calf, squirrel, it comes in layers because it's on a growing critter, and these really longest ones on that animal are the oldest. And as they move closer to the hide, they become younger, and even to the point of being just under fur. Well, what we want to make sure is we're using layers 1, and whatever is directly under it, layers 2. Everything else is fairly immature in its growth, and though it looks the same, it reacts to thread pressure different. So we're just going to stack this now, and we'll be stacking layers 1 and 2. I'll tell you what, I can't believe how good that tail looks and how easy. I mean, I just literally clipped it off of that brush and put it on the hook. That's all we had to do. What a deal. And I'll bet that black one would have been even nicer looking. That black brush was more expensive, wasn't it? It cost you $2 instead of $1. Yeah, it was twice as expensive.
Pretty close the same. They were the same brand, so it's been too long ago.
And we'll pull it out. Okay, now that's going to be enough to do the job. Good job. Yep. And there was a few extra real short ones that I missed, and I'm just making sure I get rid of them. Now I'm going to measure my tail so that it lands, the end of it lands in the middle of, or my wings. I'm going to measure my wings so it lands in the middle of the tail. Now, one of the problems that you can run into with animal hair of any type is keeping it on top of the hook. That darn stuff, I'll guarantee you, thread torque creates a problem for you every time because of that right there. You see how that twists away and goes over to the other side? And you don't want that to happen. Well, there's a way to anchor that in place so that you never have that problem again. And this is also good to use on things like poly yarn if you want to. I want you to notice that I do not have the bundle of hair sitting down on the hook. There's a space there. Now I'm going to reach in with my left hand and grab that and hold it right there above the hook. And I'm going to take a loop now around the bundle of hair only. Pull that up and pull it down to the hook. And what I've got there now is a crisscross figure 8 around that hair. So you can see that it is on top on both sides. It cannot go down on the sides because it's anchored in place by that loop around it. And it makes them just lay there perfect first time, every time. Now, one of the things about trimming the hair, a little different than Gretchen did. She did her bundles of poly in steps so that she could make a tapered hackle platform. I'm going to do that by pulling it up at a severe angle, laying my scissors in at a severe angle to make a very tapered cut on those hairs. And then I'll just start wrapping towards the hook eye. And I want you to notice how nicely, evenly tapered that is just by pulling the hair up at an angle like that and laying the scissors in at an angle like that. So now it's time to go to our hackle. And I've got this one right here. I'll just grab it and use it. And like Gretchen did, I am going to strip a little bit off of what I call the hook side. This is the side that gets wrapped up against the hook, and the other side fans out. Well, what that does is just makes that first turn lay perfect. And in fact, I'm going to make my first turn at the front of the hook, well, towards the front of the hook. I'm going to tie that on up here towards the hook eye because the customer just called me on the telephone and said, Al, that bunch of orders, those lime trudes that you're tying for me, that I wanted you to put dubbing on the back. Yeah. Well, I want them to be extra heavily hackled because we're going to the Missouri River and we want them to be really high floating. I said, okay, great, you got it. So now I want you to notice that I tied on at the front, and I'm going to wrap my first turns it towards the front, and then each subsequent turn gets closer to the back, leaving little spaces between until I get to the back. Now I'm going to anchor the feather in place there and wiggle wrap my way forward until I get in front of those turns. And now we're going to double hackle as the same as if we were wrapping 2 hackles, but we're only using 1. And I'm coming back, filling in those spaces that I left until we get up here. And now we're going to talk about a way of tying off a fly. Let me get my hand out of the way. A way of tying off the fly. And here's the way most people did. In fact, Gretchen did just a little bit ago, and she used the dog leg method of wrapping over it twice and pulling it back, and it makes a nicely shaped head because we move our garbage. This stuff right here that I'm holding on to is garbage or the next fly. If I just cut this off right there, then I have to cut it, then I got to cover it up. And that's how you end up with a good looking fly with a big lopsided head. Well, I am going to back up. There we go. Lost it. And there's another way to do it, and we've just introduced this to the fly tying public, and it's called the tie wrap. And I am going to wrap the material, the feather, around the hanging thread. The material goes around the thread, not the other way around. And I'm going to do it in such a way that the first turn goes behind and then crosses in front between me and the thread, and it's pointing in the direction of the hiding place. And where's the hiding place? Well, I'm going to hide it back here in the hackle. So that's the first turn. Let me make another turn, kind of wiggle it just a little bit so it gets all the way down to the stem, and I'm holding it back, right back like that again towards the hiding place. Now I'm going to take and wrap the thread and the feather at the same time, one turn, and that it's anchored as tight as it ever needs to be anchored. Now I'm going to finish off my fly. There's a couple of half hitches, and you can take the same tool and make a whip finish by making 2 turns. Make sure that it comes off loose enough so that they cross over each other and become a whip finish. You just made a whip finish and a half hitch with the same tool. Now I'm going to take the edge of the blade and just hold it up there and cut that feather. Come in here and do the same thing, or the thread now, the same thing with the feather, the edge of the blade, and cut it off. And now you've got a beautifully shaped head, and that is as small a head as you're ever going to see on a dry fly. And that's going to hold that perfectly fine because you've interwoven the strands of hackle, the barbs of the hackle with the thread. So they're interwoven together. Any questions?
Al,
Wow.
did you talk about the fact that your dubbing is pretty wonderful and where people could order it?
I didn't know that I was allowed to do that here, but
Absolutely. Come
oh
on.
my goodness. Well, anyway, thank you, thank you, thank you. Excuse me. Right over here is our website, btsflyfishing.com, or you can just send an email to me here at alb82@gmail. And if you visit btsflyfishing.com, you'll find wax and dubbing like Sandy talked about. But we also have books for sale. And in fact, over the years, Gretchen and I have written somewhere close to 20 books. And there's several of them here. I think it's 6 or 8 of them. Anyway, there's several of them right here. But I want you to take special note. We're headed towards the holiday season. And down here in the lower right corner, 2 books. They're ebooks. You won't get them in print. You only can get them as a download. But it's the Never Fail Peanut Brittle and Never Fail English Toffee. And I know none of you ever eat candy, but if you do, it's often done around Christmas time. And those are the 2 you want. And the key ingredient, I'm going to give you just a little bit of a tip from the book. The most important ingredient in that candy is jalapeno peppers, but you don't overdo it. It's the right amount, and it's in the recipe. But anyway,
It's just enough so you get just a clearing of your palate at the end of the candy, kind of.
Just,
yeah.
It accentuates the flavor. If it's too much, it ruins the candy. Hey, everyone, thanks so much for joining us this evening. For now, it's a wrap. Until next time, we'll be seeing you.